who worked at the restaurant with him. Worked his way through college, became enamored with Kathy, proposed to her, got engaged to Kathy, and then applied to med school. He was put on a wait list for med school, and then, having nothing better to do, his now wife, but then girlfriend, was doing a study abroad in France for a year, so he went to France to hang out with her, and they ended up working harvest in France, in Burgundy and Alsace, and ended up working some of the most well-known vineyards and wine properties of the world. At that point, you could just walk up to them and say, "Hey, I want to help you. You need help? Sure. I don't speak any French. Oh, no big deal." Now it's a whole different ballgame. Became just enamored with wine, and then came back to the U.S. and started working at a wine shop on Capitol Hill. A year later, in the same month, he got offered a job by Chateau Ste. Michelle. Found out his wife was pregnant and got into medical school. And so, because of the progression of that, decided that maybe a paying job with insurance was better than another 6 years of school, and went to work for Chateau Ste. Michelle. At that point, they were a little 60,000 case winery. They made more fruit wine than they did grape wine, or blackberry, that sort of thing. They did grape wine. So he started working in there, managing their fruit. He was their first tasting room manager, and then eventually became the director of winemaking and grape growing, which is a big job when it's a several million case winery. So he did a lot of work with, that was when a lot of the vineyards in Washington were planted, so he did a lot of work helping people actually figure out which varietals to plant at which sites. He helped Chateau Ste. Michelle figure out protocol for fruit from different parts of the state. And he was one of the first worldwide advocates for Washington wine, went all over the world, Romania, Australia, Tacoma.
Growing wine region.
The growing wine region. But so he is a master of wine. For those of you that aren't familiar with master of wine, it's different from a master sommelier. I went through the course of master sommelier as part of my sommelier training. And master of wine is sort of like, and master sommelier times 4. It's probably undoubtedly the single most grueling wine certification you can get in the world. They recommend, one of the ways they recommend preparing for it is to get your MS.
Jesus.
And he still, I think to this day, holds the record for the highest score in the viticultural portion of the MW exam. And at that point, had the highest score for the theory exam as well.
You know how many people have that?
240.
Okay, so pretty close to like the master sommelier.
Yeah, he's the only one in the world, or the only one in the U.S. that makes one.
Okay.
There's quite a few in Europe. It's actually pretty common. No, I shouldn't say common, but there's probably, I want to say 15 or 16 in Europe that are masters of wine and make wine. Almost nobody in the U.S. There's a guy, David Lake, who was Bob's mentor in the MW program. That was the winemaker, the original winemaker for Columbia Winery, back when Columbia Winery actually, was a viable company. But he passed away, and now Bob's the only one left in the U.S. And he's the viticultural instructor for the Master of Wine program. So anybody pretty much that's gone through a Master of Wine, gotten a Master of Wine in the last 10 years, or even gone through the course, he's been the one that's instructed them on the viticultural portion of that. He started Beth's family in 97 with 150 cases of Cabernet. Went full-time in 03 and built the winery in 04. So we actually were the first purpose-built winery in Woodinville outside of Chateau Ste. Michelle. How many people have actually tasted in Woodinville before? Has anybody been to the wine ghetto down there? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, the wine ghetto. So
the outlet malls.
Yeah. It's like all of these. Airline or effectively sheds. I mean, that are just lined up next to each other, like they're old storage facilities, airline hangars, and a lot of the wineries are in those. When you can go, there's probably 80 wineries in half a square mile area. And so Bob was actually the first of those small wineries to actually build a winery that was meant to be a winery. We've never had a tasting room because at that point even we didn't have wine to taste. But everything's built for production. It's meant to be easily moved, sanitized, cooled, temperature controlled, and kept clean. He's kind of a germaphobe, a little bit of a germaphobe, a lot of winemakers are. So built that in 04. In 2009, we closed our mailing list. So we do about 60% of our sales through our mailing list. And we closed it because we wanted to cap it at a certain percentage of our sales, which is about 2/3 of our total production. So right now there's about a 30-month wait to get onto the mailing list to be able to buy wine directly from the winery.
Unless they join us for our dinner, then they leapfrog that mailing list. So that's another selling point, as you're telling people that they're able to jump, a 2+ year waiting list by joining us for that wine.
Don't tell them that. Tell them they have to pay you $50.
Yeah.
Tell them if you come to the winery and they give you $50, you know somebody at the winery, you might be able to.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
I like your style.
Yeah, you don't survive in restaurants for 20 years without.
Low sales in
Yeah. But so it's been 5 years since you could actually sign directly up to the mailing list. Now we made 5,000 cases, which is a drop in the bucket in the worldwide wine community. Sriracha St. Michelle's smallest vessel for fermentations would hold our entire annual production in one thing. That's the smallest lot they do. Like I said, about 2/3 of that goes to our mailing list. So in terms of what's actually distributed, it's about 1,800 cases, 2,000 cases a year worldwide. So that's Washington, national, and international. So once again, very small amounts. Most of the people that have the wine in Washington, it's about 90% restaurants. The average allocation would be about 6 to 12 bottles per year of a given wine. So it's very small. Outside of Washington, there's states that have the entire state gets 4 or 5 cases a year, and they're allocating it 3 bottles at a time, 4 bottles at a time, something like that. So it's really a pretty small availability kind of thing. Most of the stuff that we're tasting here, you wouldn't be able to actually go out anywhere in the Puget Sound and find this stuff retail. So that's pretty cool. Beausoleil is what we have in the glass. This is a neat wine. This is the wine that originally got me into Betts family years and years and years ago. And that's what's from here. It's super pretty. So this is a Southern Rhone blend. So it's a blend of varietals that are common. Is anybody familiar with Chateauneuf du Pape? Does that ring a bell? So it's probably the most famous region for Grenache in the world. They tend to, this is a blend of Grenache, Cinsault, Mourvedre, Syrah, and Pinot. And I know probably nobody's heard of Cinsault and Pinot. They're Southern Rhone blended grapes that are very rare to actually have in the U.S. And it's very rare to find a wine that actually has all of them together. But tends to be very, very silky textured. You get a lot of that kind of that baking spice, kind of clove, nutmeg sort of stuff on the mid palate. You get a lot of kind of floral, lavender, sage, fresh herbs. Really savory wine, but really bright red raspberry kind of fruit. There was somebody a while back that called it the gateway drug between Pinot and Syrah. That's apt, I think. Because it sort of has that silky texture of Pinot. And, you get the people that they only drink Pinot for red wines because they're afraid of tannin. They don't like it. And this certainly satisfies that, but it has a little more meat, a little more body, a little more stuffing. Probably one of the single most versatile pairing wines for Washington. You can have this with salmon, cool, works wonderfully. And when I worked down Wild Ginger, we had I think they still do have they have an allocation of Beausoleil that's equivalent in a lot of states. They just blow through it because their food is brutal to prepare because they've got sugar, they've got a lot of fish sauce, all this stuff that just kills wine. And this has a lot of stuff that's good for pairing. The spices, the fruit, the silky texture. It doesn't have the stuff that messes with pairing like tannin, etc. Really, really pretty wine. This is the oldest Grenache plant in Washington. Goes into this wine. It's from Upland Vineyard, planted in 1973, so 42 years old. So, pretty cool. How many people like this wine?
It's super good. It's really good.
Yeah.
Josh doesn't even like wine, and he said it's good.
It was good. You don't like wine? What do you like?
Beer.
Scotch.
Okay, that's
This
fine.
is really good, yeah. Very good.
Thank God. Well, I'll tell you what, if we made it past the guy that doesn't even like wine, that's a pretty
Yeah,
good deal.
that's right. If you want to write that down.
Yeah. Can we do a little informational video with you? You're gonna have you like smoking a cigarette with a scotch.
With a single bottle.
Wine,
Yeah.
do that sort of thing.
We don't sell this one. It's for the quarterbacks.
One thing that
hide down and force to drink something. I give you a base.
Bye, I'm gonna miss you.
well, yeah, you can.
I'm gonna say that.
I like what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Bay Soleil, I'm gonna miss you.
Looks really, really good, but I like the anyway.
The name Bay Soleil is a hybrid of two different words. Two different languages, actually. Let me quick get this up. It's right. So give this one a good swirl. This is the name Bay Soleil is a hybrid of the word beso, which is you know beso.
Kiss and Spanish.
Oh, who said that?
It was both of us.
Did you say okay? Then I'm way to go, you two. And the word soleil. Does anybody know what soleil
Sun
is?
in French, I think. Ooh, that
Look at you cosmopolitan. You're not from Seattle. Nobody knows French in Seattle.
From LA.
4 years.
We know everything.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
So.
Did you?
Yeah, 4 years in high school.
Oh gosh, you don't even use it except for today.
Still.
Ah yes,
My twin sister took it too so we could speak a different language if that nobody understands.
that's kind of awesome.
Spanish, everybody knows.
Everybody knows Spanish.
So I'm gonna put these. I'm gonna put these right here so that everybody remembers.
This one is the Syrah.
Which Syrah is this? The La Serena?
This is the La Cruz. La Cruz. So anyway, so beso, kiss, soleil, sun, kiss of the sun. It's kind of an ode to traditional homes of Grenache in northern Spain and southern France. So it's a hybrid of those two. And it's also Grenache is a really late ripening variety with a lot of sun. So that's sort of the double meaning of it. So this is a La Côte Rousse. It is the, we do actually 4 single vineyard Syrah at Betts family. Bob's a big believer in Syrah being one of the most sight-revealing great varieties in the world in terms of it really changes expression a lot depending on where it's planted, just like Pinot. So as opposed to the rest of the wine, the Southern Rhone and the Bordeaux grape blends that we blend across appellation and varietal, the Syrahs are 100% Syrah, 100% single site. 2 of them go entirely to the Manus. We don't make enough of them to make it outside the Manus. The 2 that get distributed are the La Serena and the La Côte Rousse right here. This is actually a 2010, so I pulled out something that had a little bit of bottle age, because the stuff that you guys have has a little bit of bottle age, which is terrific. The older they get, for the most part, the better they get for the Syrah, and for a lot of these, rather. But so the La Côte Rousse is the Red Mountain. Right. Everybody familiar? Everybody heard Red Mountain at least. So Red Mountain is the hottest AVA in Washington. It is probably the most well known of the Washington AVAs. This is 2 different vineyards, Ciel de Cheval and Cayona. There was a spot on the mountain that Bob wanted to be on. So the northern part of Ciel de Cheval comes like this, and the southern part of Cayona Ranch at the end of the road comes like this. There's a service road in between. We've got the blocks on both sides of that.
Oh, wow.
So we drive when we sample it, we drive the truck in the middle and go down one side, leave the truck there, and go on the other side. So we think of it as being a single-site Syrah, but it can't be called a single vineyard because it's 2 named vineyards. Even though those blocks are closer to each other than they are the most of the rest of the vineyards. And it really tends to be, of the 2, dark fruited, really earthy. You really get this kind of smoked peat moss. I really get like a Scotch barrel kind of iodine quality to it. That makes sense to you. That makes sense to a lot of folks who are Scotch drinkers. Really kind of have this almost gamey apple sort of quality to it. You guys have any La Serena?
Yeah, we have 08 and 09. A couple bottles of each.
So one thing that I used to love doing for large parties, or small parties that we're drinking, is suggest a side-by-side, where you sell 2 bottles of, especially with the bottle age on it. You guys are probably one of, just off the top of my head, 7 or 8 restaurants in the entire Puget Sound that actually has those wines at those vintages with that kind of bottle age on it. I will guarantee you that you're probably the lowest price on them.
Wow.
That's nice of us.
And we're the highest price on everything. So,
Because a lot of places the older stuff gets, they'll They charge more for it because there's a premium for wines that are ageable. And what's cool is as they get older, the differences in the vineyard really start to show. So what's cool is you can kind of sell it as being, hey, this is a really great opportunity to see the same wine made by the same grape, made by the same winemaker, same winemaking techniques, same valley, 20 miles apart from each other as the fur flies. Same ripeness level, even though one's hotter and one's cooler, we always pick them at the same level of ripeness, so they're going to have the same amount of resulting alcohol. So as opposed to, like, a lot of times if you have a hot, like an Australian Shiraz versus a French Syrah, there's a huge difference in ripeness. You have one that's 16% that has a little bit of residual sugar on it, you have one that's 13% bone dry, and just that difference is going to be huge, as opposed to actually trying to compare sites. So here's something that you can actually compare a cool site to a warm site. And it's really cool. And a lot of people, I've had people that don't know the Syrah is a grape. You know, and then, you know, they're just, that's where they are in their wine education, that's fine. That upon hearing the story and sort of tasting them side by side, that terroir, or the site, that kind of idea that site affects wine kind of goes off. You know, like, oh wow. Because, you know, some people like Uncle Rouge better, some people like La Sirène better, and that's fine, there's no right answer. But they're different enough that when you try them side by side, immediately you have an opinion. You know? And that's what's pretty cool when you know the story, right? And this is probably this one we're trying to date at 10, it's probably still the slowly one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. But so yeah, I would say don't be afraid of those 08 and 09 Syrahs, because they definitely will be, and they're crowd pleasers. And I think a lot of times Syrah is something that a lot of people have to sell. Because, you know, people that don't know a lot about wine, you sit down a wine list, they'll go for the Cabs or the, you know, Pinot or something like that. But Syrah's a lot more versatile. Tends to go food a lot better than Cab does. Don't say that to, you know, we're going to try some Cab. We'll talk about how great the Cab is too. But this is, but I mean, really, in terms of, you know, from a food pairing perspective, Cab is the kind of model that there's a narrow range of stuff that it goes with, whereas Syrah goes with a ton of stuff. And in my experience, Syrah is one of those things, kind of like the Beausoleil. Beausoleil is, I think, a little bit easier, but where people never, when you sell it, people are never sad that they bought it. You know, which I think is a cool selling. It's a cool thing when you actually recommend something and people are excited about it. It's a cool deal. Everyone wins. You win in the end. Best Family. We manage. You know what? Can I just hand these around instead of?
Yeah, we can pour them.
Yeah.
You can take as much as you want. So don't. I mean, well, within reason.
First one.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
So
I remember
such a great one.
the very first one I ever went to as a wine buyer. There's the inevitable. Has anybody ever been to a trade tasting? Okay, so there's, you know, everybody's pouring blah blah blah, and there's the people that are there to try the wine, there are people that are there to catch a buzz, and you know, there's a pretty firm line between the two. And at the end, all the wine reps and everybody goes out, and you know, yeah, hilarity ensues. Well, so the first time I'll never forget, I was with this guy from a California winery one evening. They had one of those Riedel Bordeaux glasses that holds 26 ounces, so you put a full bottle of wine in. Which is a great
Those are
bottle.
glasses?
No.
Oh, I'm like.
And he's like, oh, you want some Cab? And, oh, sure, I'll take some. You know, and I'd already been drinking wine for 4 hours, so I didn't need by any stretch of the imagination. And he literally poured the entire bottle and filled my entire 25, and I had no idea how much in. Like, oh, wow, it's a good pour, you know. Drank the whole thing, and that was like one of the worst nights of my life. Oh, my God. And then the next day we had to go and do all this wine tasting, and I was like, no more wine. No more wine. So please don't fill your glass entirely up.
All that to
The
say.
moral of the story. All that to say.
If I gave them 25-ounce glasses, they might have. That's why
Yeah.
I had to go with the smaller glasses. Just
Oh, goodness.
So this is the City Me. So Bet's Family, we manage 33 blocks of grapes across 9 vineyards. Those 33 blocks add up to about 35 acres. So in terms of, do the math, they're about an acre of blocks. So thinking about how specifically we're picking where we are with the vineyards, it's extremely narrow. If anybody, I don't know if anybody's ever been to a vineyard, but we hear these vineyard names, but vineyard names tend to be, they're large places. And so it's not just about being in that vineyard, it's about where you are in that vineyard. And Bob knows these vineyards very, 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 very well. So part of his sort of what he brought to the industry is saying he was the first person to ever actually pick his own rows in vineyards. Up until then, people would just buy based on bulk tonnage contracts. So say, you have a Salish Vineyard Cabernet, and you would, or Salish Vineyard, and you would talk to them in April and say, hey, I'd like 5 tons of your cab. And then they'd call you in October and say, hey, your cab's ready when you want it. And that was the extent that winemakers had involvement with the growers. What Bob said was he wanted to not only be able to say I want to be in this vineyard, but I actually want to pick the exact spot and the exact rows in those vineyards. And then manage those with the farming on those rows. So we do 33 blocks. We manage spring and winter pruning. We manage the green, all the leaf, the canopy. We manage all that management. Water levels, soil nutrition. We do all of our own soil sampling, all of our own grape sampling. We do all of our own lab work on our own grape sampling. So with our staff of 3, right? So a grape sampling trip in the summer means that, or during harvest means that one of us needs to get in the truck over here in Woodinville. About 5 o'clock in the morning, we drive 4 hours to the vineyards. We spend about 4 hours sampling, and then we go 4 hours back. So then it's about 5 o'clock at night. Everything's in vacuum packed bags on ice. We take everything out. We crush the grapes. We taste the juice. We taste the skins. We do all of our own lab work, and we can make a picking decision for 24 hours later, so that the next night stuff's getting picked. And every single block, even though they're all very small, every single block is picked based on palate, which is extremely rare in the wine industry, and even more rare in Washington, where you have a lot of people that have vineyards that are quite a far ways away from
The actual
where the
winery.
actual wineries are. Clodabets. This is you guys have the 12. This is killer stuff this year. It's really good. Clodabets is always Merlot dominant. It's a Merlot dominant Bordeaux blend. A lot of people get scared by Merlot. The side race thing. I'll tell you what, man. Was anybody working service like within the last 5 or 6 years after Sideways came out? That was a dark time to sell wine. Oh my God!
What was that movie about?
The amount of guys in suits that everyone was like, oh God. Oh, it was just awful. Oh, thank God that there's some time and distance from that.
I was working at restaurants in downtown Sonoma at that time, and it was
Yeah. And everybody, and it's like nobody had ever, like nobody's ever told a joke before. Like every time, it was new every time in the first person.
There's still people won't drink Merlot down there.
So a lot of people find it, it's very appropriate to describe this as a Bordeaux blend. Right? It's a blend of Cabernet, Merlot, and Petit Verdot, just like they do it in Bordeaux. Oldest Merlot block in the state from Red Willow Vineyard goes into this wine. The percentages change from year to year, but it's like the dominance, the Merlot dominance always stays the same. The 12s, and you'll notice this with the Cabernet we're about ready to try too. Extremely dense, extremely concentrated, very weighty. They're big, healthy wines. But because of that richness, a lot of folks, they're very good properties, and a lot of people really love them. And I think what's interesting is the single most confused blind tasting varietal in the world is Washington Merlot. This is interesting. By people that know what they're doing. Even. Everybody thinks it's Cab. It's got great structure. It's got tannin to it.
Yeah.
It's got a spine to it. There's a real savory quality to it. Like this sort of like fresh basil, thyme. It's got a real earthiness to it. But a lot of times people trying to blind, I used to love doing that with people that I'm not going to drink no fucking Merlot guys. That I would blind them on this very wine.
Just watch it
like,
go.
just bring something out for me. This wine. I try it. Oh, what's this? It's delicious. What is it? It's Merlot.
And it's kind of cool to put that in front of the guests and your people too, because, like you said, it's often confused and nobody realizes that. So when you show them, it's kind of like mind blown. They never really thought about that, and they're like, "Oh, I cab drinker likes Merlot, and they just said they didn't because they thought they didn't.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, you don't. Obviously, there's an internal dialogue that we all live with that we don't externalize to the guests.
Yeah.
You know? But it is fun. I think a lot of people, their minds have changed from Merlot, trying Washington Merlot. Good examples of Washington Merlot. So the cab next. But, and this one you have for amount of it's cool. This is an extremely limited wine. There's only 800 cases of this. Betts is doing a partnership with Columbia that gives Columbia properties a little more access to it than the average. So you'll have more access to this than anyone in the state really, which is kind of neat. Just a real quick, and this is something that you'll never probably be able to actually, or that your guests will not care about, but it's kind of cool. That applies to both of these wines, the Cabernet and the Merlot blend. We do all of our blending with double blind. So, which is a ridiculous thing to do when you're looking at 5,000 cases. And this actually affects the Cuvée Francham. So we do about 250 barrels a year. The way most people, most wineries in the world will manage their barrels or their lots by what's called tasting by lot. So let's say you have 100 barrels of Salish Vineyard Cabernet again. Winemaker would taste 10 to 15% of those barrels and assume that they're representative for the entire lot. Right? So Bob has always believed that once wine goes from a fermenter into a barrel, no two barrels are ever exactly alike, even from the same cooper, made exactly the same way, from the same forest, the same toast level. They're never exactly alike. He considers each one his own wine, so he tastes each one individually. So we have 250 barrels a year. He goes through, he tastes each one, makes detailed tasting notes, and then ranks them according to the tier system that we use. It takes usually about 5 days to make it through all the barrels. And everybody thinks, oh, that's a lot of fun, but it's not. I mean, when you're actually having to intellectually analyze each one and go through, it's brutal.
It's not just drinking wine.
Yeah, it's not just drinking wine. You're spitting. So. But so then, by the time he does that 4 times during his time in barrel. So by the time we get to blending, we have a set of about 1,000 tasting notes. So we'll take those tasting notes and we'll make trial blends. So for the Bordeaux blends, we usually do about 35 to 40. Even for the single vineyard Syrahs, we do 15 to 20. Even though it's one grape, one vineyard, they're just different barrel combinations. We try those double blind in flights of 5. So none of us know what they are. The varietal percentages. We don't know what case production they represent. It could be 800, it could be 1,000, it could be 2,000 for all we know. And we gradually whittle it down to a final line. Then once we get down to that final blend, that's when we find out the case quantity, the varietal percentage, all that stuff. It's completely double blind. Whatever's left over, once we make that decision, nothing's ever blended back into it. So, like for instance, the 2012 Clos de Betz, we shoot for about 1,000 cases of Clos de Betz. The 11 had 1,000, I think 1,050, if I remember correctly. The 2012 had 800 because we selected an 800 barrel blend. That's a 28% production drop in 1 year, but that's what we win. 800 cases of Clos de Betz. The Beausoleil for 2012 doesn't have any Crenoise in it because the blend that was selected didn't have any Crenoise in it, so we sold off every single barrel of Crenoise that we made that year, which is another thing that for a small winery is extremely difficult to do. So because of that, we have this pool. Anything that doesn't make it into that blending process is considered our declassified wine. That's the wine that's left over after we make our blends. We declassify about 30% of what we make. So we make about 5,500 cases worth of wine. We declassify about 30% of that, which is a massive amount for a winery of our size. It's a massive amount for any winery. It's a massive amount for a winery of our size. But the idea is that we want to make sure that kind of the cream of what we do is making it into our core wines. And there's a lot of really triple wine left over. And that's where Cuvée Francham comes in. So Cuvée Francham, we take those declassified barrels, we do the same blending process with those, and blend Cuvée Francham. Whatever's left over after that is sold off bulk to other wineries. So that's why we end up with we make about 5,500 cases worth of wine, but only 500 get followed with that as Betts found with the other 10%. Usually it's about 10% usually they end up selling that. But so Cuvée Francham is the same grape variety, or same vineyards, same fruit, same coopers, same everything. Nothing is ever destined to go in there at the beginning of the year. It's all a decision that's made at blending, and it's all a decision that's made completely double blind. And a lot of times people think, oh well, it's probably the lesser quality juice. Well, to some degree. But there's also, blending isn't a thing where you just take the best of everything and put it together. Sometimes and which is why we do a double blind. The whole, how something adds to the whole is not something that's an exact science. So there may be something that we're tasting this entire time and saying, oh, it's a killer barrel. Killer barrel has to be in there, has to be in there, has to be in there. Then we do all of our blending and find out it's not in there because it didn't make part of the best blend, right? And that ends up in Clear French barrels like that. So, by no means did I take this for selling. This is still a little chilly. I apologize. I took it out of the case goods right before I brought it over. This is Clear French. This is 13. How many people? Does everybody have 13?
Is that what we're
To be honest, we started at the 12 and we moved to 13. I haven't tried it since we switched.
Okay, so here's so you guys can hang out.
Oh no, the first one was killer.
I'll pass that around.
This one and the last one have that whole tannins thing and that astringent in the beginning.
So the
Chris.
So the 13, the difference with the 13 is going to be a little more cab, a little more Syrah, a little less Merlot from the 12. So it'll be a little meatier, a little more red fruited, but really a cool wine, especially at this stage. And once again, this is a little chilly, and you'll notice it, so you might need to warm it up in your hands a little bit as you're swirling. But I think the important thing to remember that for us, the one thing that we really want to communicate about Cuvée Franchane is that it's not like we take all this declassified fruit, put it in a big tank, and put it in a bottle. There's still a culling process. We only use usually about 60 to 70% of the declassified stuff. It's an intentionally made wine using those declassified barrels of raw material. And I don't know how much, for us that feels like an important distinction. I don't know if we move a large amount of it does. How's this been received, by the way? As any of you guys
People like it when they try it based against our blend, and someone wanted the Amavi Cab and they loved this way more.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think we've gone through about 6 cases here.
Yeah.
Have to get a couple more next week.
Yeah. No, it's selling.
Yeah.
I mean, from our point of view, it's selling well. I don't know how it's working. You guys.
Price point and balance, pairing with what our menu is right now, so really well, because actually, we have a lot of great items with all the class.
Right.
So, to wash goes super well, it's like a lot of times, the guy's gonna pick the bottle. But if you present that to the ladies, this tastes really appealing to them. It's really smooth, have great flavor and volume and deep. But sometimes, it's like people are surprised. It's like I like Syrah personally, but when they go in, it's like basically, it's a blend, mostly cab. It's like kind of people get a surprise because well balanced and like really smooth. It's a good seller.
Cool.
Easy to do it.
Cool.
Just put it in front of a lady, she loved it. So
Cool.
from there you go.
Well, and ladies, you realize that it is a scientific, and this is I'm not kidding you. It's a scientific fact that on the average, women have better palates than men.
Yeah, I believe that.
You know that? Maybe you probably ever heard that before.
I
That is
believe
a. It's a.
Not just that.
I think one of the best things that's happening in the wine world is we're getting more women in as some of the amazing winemakers because they have better palates than we do. And there's a variety. There's a variety of theories as to why that's the case, but it's undoubtedly the case. So you can lord that over your male counterparts.
Amazing.
I'm sorry, can you consider this like other wineries, like they have like second tier, wine?
Mm-hmm.
This can be like.
I mean,
Even when you say that it's like
it's a decline.
premium, but it's not premium.
Totally. Yeah, it's not. And price wise, there's a distinct drop from the rest of them to this. But yeah, totally. It's baby bets. The Franchane. So Franchane means little brother, and I think it's on some of these notes here. So it's like a little brother cuvee. That's kind of what it is. We didn't want to actually make a lot of wineries. What they'll do is they'll make a second wine where it's not that winery's label. It's they'll do this in Bordeaux. They do Washington all the time.
Pepper Bridge, Almavive.
Pepper Bridge, Almavive, an example. But we kind of wanted. I mean, we wanted to own it as part of. This is factors into why the other wines are the way they are. You know, because the reason why Cuvée Frangiane exists is because we wanted the other wines to be as dense and concentrated and characterful as we could. And this is sort of an outpouring of that, but it's still part of the family. You know, it's still a recognizably, and I think tasting through the whole lineup, it's still a recognizably Betz wine. Still got good structure, great acidity, it's fresh fruited,
Yeah, it's good.
good body. There's an earthy component to it that's in a lot of our wines. But it's just not maybe, it doesn't have quite the density or quite the character, but it's not supposed to, it's not priced at that. You know, it's supposed to be a different intention, but I think that's completely appropriate to say that it's, you know, it's not, it's meant to be slightly more accessible, slightly more characterful, lower, second tier. I mean, we hate to call it second tier, but I mean, I think that's appropriate.
I think, you know, it's like it can be an introduction for somebody who really wants to spend
Totally.
more money. You know, because
Totally.
like if we present it that way, this price point is excellent. You know, it's like if we used to have the Cabernet, you know, the glasses, the cheap one sometimes was like $26. You know, and introduce this at $18. It's a good price point. It's $14 just for a regular cap that we have. So, you know, and obviously, you know, if the way that you want to present to the guests, you know, it's like, well, it's more expensive. Obviously, more you pay, the better wine. And a lot of times people don't see that way too. You know, it's kind of hard to tell them, you want better wine, you can spend more money.
Right.
But as an introduction for the winery and the type of wine, it's going to be great.
It's tasty.
Cool. Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's
Like
exactly
special
what that should
occasion
be.
kind of, because I saw that kind of special occasions, like they're talking about, it's like, oh, we love this wine. It's like, hey, you know, it's like, get a bottle, you know, open it at a special occasion, it's obviously more expensive, you know, between this one and the other one, yeah. Which one is the other one?
Yeah, because I think
The
the
Claudette's.
Yep.
Code of Bet's
I
on
like
the list
this
for
one
what,
better.
120
Bet's.
something? Yeah, 120 something.
Yep, what's the name?
Yeah. And this is what, $60? Or no?
68, yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, half the price.
Good steal. It really is to like introduce them to like this amazing assortment of like where they can go next and what they want to try after.
And
this,
it's
you know?
easy to point out to the guests too, because on that little feature in the square, they're right there next to each other, so they're
Right.
directly seeing those two. So it's easy to kind of transition them into that because they're going to be like, oh yeah, I'll try that one. You know.
What is, just out of curiosity, what percentage, if you had to guess ballpark, what percentage of the people that you have, the covers that you have over a given week are people that have been here before or are here multiple times in a year, as opposed to people that are here once a year? Or,
We don't have any repeat customers.
Yeah, we have
And like
special
you know, we have a special occasion person. It's like once a year come here for a celebration, anniversary, birthday, whatever. But it's not like they come every month.
Yeah.
Once
Even
a
our
month.
regulars are once every 2-3 months. You
Yeah.
know, if
Right.
you can
So
even
it's
call
kind
them
of
that
hard
at
to
that
kind of,
point.
you know,
Right.
like, you know,
Are they the people that tend to spend the night? Like they spend the
Yeah.
night every
Yeah.
1 or 2 months?
And you'll have like people that you'll see multiple nights in a row.
Right.
Sometimes,
Right,
Like you'll
but
see
they're
them
not.
like maybe 2 or 3 nights
Right.
for dinner. And you know, you already kind of know like what they're looking for, and maybe they'll try something new like that second
Right.
or third night, you know? So that's a good thing, like to, you know, kind of get that rapport, but they're not necessarily going to see the same server either,
Right.
you know? So it's like if you happen to get them again and you recognize what you've already kind of been through on that journey the night before, like you can play off of that, but more often than not, you're going to see somebody new, you know?
Totally.
Yeah, and they might have the cuvee and then come in the next night and feel like spending a little more money because it's the
Well, I'm
special
saying
occasion. Be
that's
like,
the nice
oh
thing.
yeah, we love that one. We feel like buying a little nicer bottle of wine. Let's try the Clos de Betz tonight.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I think it's funny. There's and I don't want to get all like geeky on you guys, but and some of you are thinking too late. But the so I could give you odds are on the average on most of us at this table, you know, and then regardless of how much you know about wine, I could put 2 bottles of Cuvée Frangiane at the table, or Clos de Betz or whatever. I could give you one and tell you this is $50. I could give you the other one and tell you this is $200. And put differently, are these 2 different wines. The $200 wine for most of us and has the same wine will taste
Tastes
better.
better. Yeah.
It's not a matter of you
Whether
think
it
it tastes
tastes
better.
better.
It's a matter that the pleasure centers in your brain actually light up more because it's more expensive and you think it's more
Feel obligated to like.
So,
saying it's
and so that transmits to your flavor receptors, etc. It actually will taste better for most of us. Now that's not across the board, but most of us. I think that's the really cool thing to me about over the years when you sell somebody into a splurge, is that if they feel like they're splurging just a little bit and they like it, it makes that splurge feel all the better, right? It's like, oh, I took this risk on that. And now it's all about, like, ooh. even if it's the same wine. Like, I mean, really, it does, it's all about the idea of what you're getting into, right? Now, that said, I don't want to make it sound like it's all that, because, hopefully there are other reasons why. But I mean, just in terms of restaurant service from over the years, like, I think that's one thing that is cool about upselling. I think a lot of times we feel like when we upsell, we're being pushy or we're being whatever, and you don't want to be pushy. But I think there is something to upselling that actually can give the guests a better experience, assuming that what you're selling them they enjoy.
Right.
Now, of course, if they don't enjoy it, then you're a shit creek problem. It's a risk, But I always think that's kind of cool, and it's funny. I always like, even if somebody was looking at a $35, and it's not like you always, if people are actually, if they have a price range, certainly that price range for sure. But I'm going to point out the $45. Well, there's this guy, even $15 extra. I try. Oh, this.
Which is a nice thing about our list and the tiering and the way it's designed with the prices too, is there's almost always the same thing for $15 more to push them to. It's really designed in steps like that.
So that's the cool thing. Somebody likes to put a French on one thing, that's the next.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
What percentage of bottles that you guys sell? And this is another number with the ballpark, over $100.
Oh, less than.
Less now because.
No, less than 10%. Like.
Over $100 or more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like 5%. Everything.
Yeah.
Everything's in the
70,
60 to 85. That's the sweet spot.
But you do get guests that want to splurge like that. Like,
But it's seldom.
if they're looking for like a really nice cab, before obviously we've been, introduced to all the bets. Like Chateau Montelena was like a really big one that I would be like, it's amazing. If you don't love it, like obviously we're gonna take care of the bottle. So the least you can do if you're looking for a really nice cab is, give it a sample. I guarantee you're gonna love it. It's like, it's things like that where you just kind of get them to go out on the limb, especially if they're already looking at it.
Right.
You're like, what's the worst thing that's gonna happen? You're gonna send it back. Let's get it open.
Let's see. Prove it.
Yeah, but the chance to send something like this back is gonna be minimum.
Yeah.
nobody
And
does.
it's like you're paying like $200 less.
Yeah.
Put it away.
How much is a Chateau Montelena?
Like,
100.
$325,
Yeah.
Give
I don't know
25.
How much you have now?
No, it's 100.
Yeah.
It's $100 a
Not
bottle.
even.
No, we used to have like
So it's in that same.
Yeah, exactly. It's right in that same area where you can, talk about, multiple wines, but kind of suggest them in different ways, but still get them to take that leap.
Cool. Oh, cool. So, any questions? Any other things we should cover? Anything that?
So here you put, the barrel contents, 100% French oak, 20% new, 80% one field. So that means that you go it from barrel to barrel, or
So what that means is there's a certain percentage of every, you'll hear people talk about the percentage of new oak that's in a wine. So new oak means that it's a brand new barrel, it's never been used before. This went in, and so what happens with oak barrels is there's a certain amount of, let's just call it flavor compounds, just to be as simple as possible. There's a certain amount of flavor compounds in the oak. You put wine in it, it's just like a tea bag in some ways. You put a tea bag in, and you get that first really good, or really crappy, whatever, depending on the tea, but first thing of tea, and then you put it in a new one, and it's much weaker. Same thing with oak. Even more pronounced. So during you put wine in that first year, depending on the barrel force, etc., 85 to 90% of the extractable oak compounds will come out of in that first year. So then when you go around and do it the second, another 90% will come out. But it's going to be 90% of the 10% that were remaining after the first year. So the impact is much less. And it depends, some of it can be even more, some less. So usually after 2 years, it's effectively completely neutral. Once fill is pretty minimal. So when we give those percentages, we're saying that a certain percentage has never been used before, and a certain percentage we've used the previous vintage or vintages. Beausoleil, for instance, has no new oak at all. It's 100% concrete tanks and neutral barrels. And that's because we want it to be super fresh. We don't want the oak to come down the freshness of it, right? And the same thing with Cuvée Franchon in a way. Cuvée Franchon is a lot less new oak. Should be fresh, more fresh fruited, more juicy. And it totally is when you really get that kind of juicy cranberry pomegranate kind of thing going on.
And it's a big difference like Syrah, the display.
Yeah, well, it's...
How more like a meaty kind of...
Oh, totally.
More like Syrah, like a nice Syrah, and just basically, the oak, you know.
Well, and the varietal too, and that's one of the things that Syrah does. Syrah's can be a real meaty. I mean, sometimes really meaty.
That's good.
Yeah. I love like sweaty meats, like the sweaty Italian meats that you put them on a plate and they get the little bubbles of oil on. Love that stuff. And that's what Syrah, like to me, is like a good Syrah like has that sort of element of Italian meat to it. That I love. Anybody Italian? Yeah. I wasn't talking about you. But I appreciate you too, dude.
Oh my God.
Whoa!
See, that's what you get.
What just happened? What just happened?
Making fun of the motherland.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
Some with that voodoo on him.
Instant karma.
Talk about that motherland.
Yeah, I know, man. Bob is he's first generation Italian.
Is that right?
Or I shouldn't say he's second generation. His parents like off the boat. Speaks fluent Italian. You wouldn't think because Betz is obviously a German name, but it's like like the one German guy in the whole family tree ended up being the one that passed the name down in this one. The rest of them are all Italian. But they're pretty funny. His parents, when the first time, they grew up and wine was a very big thing, but everybody, they drink crap. Especially at that point in the U.S., it was, anybody old enough to remember Thunderbird? Anybody remember Thunderbird?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's
How do you know?
Thunderbird Night Track?
Yeah.
How do you know? You're like my age.
Yeah,
It's a thing, okay.
Totally. So, they were doing stuff like that, and like Carlo Rossi and things like that. So Bob, the first time Bob made a cab, he took his first barrel and he took it over to his father, who's now passed on, and said, Dad, look, this is our first wine. And he took it and he said, and he literally got tears, and he said, I'm going to put my name on a bottle of wine. It's a terrific bottle. He just thought it was beautiful. And then put it in the refrigerator. Yeah. And I think they had a bottle, and it probably was a little more serious than what they were looking for. So they just sort of had an open bottle usually in the fridge. Ask a bottle for one, and it's like, no. Oh, you can have mine. It's pretty awesome. But yeah, so anyway, we're very pro-Italian at best.
Oh my God.
Any other questions? Anything else we can talk about? No. And we don't have to. All right, cool. Thanks for